We're here today at Bow Street. This is where the main retail district of Liverpool city centre actually commences. It's located not too far away from Chinatown, which is just there. This is very street itself. And then obviously you've got just behind me, I'm going to whiz the camera around. There you go, the bombed out church. The bombed out church, or the St. Luke's Church as it's called, is the top end of Bow Street, or traditionally the top end of Bow Street. And at the bottom you've got the Lyceum, and not too further away you've got both of the Liverpool universities. So you've got the University of Liverpool, John Moore University. You've got the Anglican Cathedral, only 5 minutes walking distance, and obviously the Rodney Street next to it, and then you've got the Metropolitan Cathedral as well. And further along from Bow Street you've got the Liverpool one and Church Street itself. Yeah, so Bow Street has an incredible and an amazing history. Bow Street is named after Jonas Bold. Jonas Bold was a famous slave merchant, sugar trader and a banker. He was also the mayor of Liverpool around 1802. Jonas Bold leased land from the Liverpool Corporation around about 1785. He was a rich man. He also owned the plot on which the bombed out church was eventually built. Prior to Jonas Bold acquiring the land, it was home to a ropery owned by slave traders James and Jonathan Brooks. Bow Street started off as a field where ropes were made for sailing ships. Back in the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century, the land was owned by Bowler family. But because the road was used to make ropes, it was known more popularly as Rope Street. The street was laid out as a rope walk, so as a long, thin area of land used to manufacture rope, hence the reason why today it's known as rope walks. Manufacturers would measure the rope from the top of Bow Street, where the bombed out church is, all the way to the bottom of the Lyceum, and cut it because it was the standard length needed for sailing ships. That length is roughly about 400 meters long. So around about 1780, it was laid out for residences. Merchants who were working on docks needed houses close by, so they can have quick access to the dock area, and obviously they can oversee the activities around that area as well. So the field were very quickly developed into houses, and the houses were constructed with Hanover Street first. Then houses were constructed on Duke Street, which is just a couple of streets away from Bow Street. Then finally on Bow Street itself. And naturally, when people get wealthier, they tend to look for more spacious places, more exclusive places to stay. So the wealthy people gradually moved out to the suburbs where they could have the large gardens surrounding their beautiful homes. And eventually the area was totally given away to shops selling finest goods money could buy. And hence the reason why Bow Street became known as the Bond Street of the North. Bond Street is obviously the famous street within London, which is known throughout the world for its exclusive and rich garments and shops, etc. And Liverpool, especially Bow Street, was considered to be the Bond Street version of that in the northern part of the country. Naturally, what would happen? You would have carriages would clutter into the streets from the outskirts of Liverpool. You would have fine drawn coaches, drawn by horses, pulling behind each other. A lot like modern day taxis, I guess. Obviously, much more beautiful in their appearance. It was a glamorous place, but Bow Street was still surrounded by business and factories. You had mills in Wood Street, just behind Bow Street itself. You've had other manufacturing firm also very active around the area. Today, Bow Street is an incredibly vibrant and an exciting shopping area. You've got all different kind of cultures who have come to Bow Street and open restaurants. So back in the days you used to have the Bengali restaurants, which are no longer there, but today they have like so Greeks, and they have the Mexicans and Lebanese. It's not just a street for food, it's so much more. It's a hot pot of so much different activities. You have paint shops, you have clothing shops, you have charities, you have fascinating and quite unique bookstores as well. At the bottom of Bow Street is this gorgeous neoclassical building just behind me. It's a Grade 2 listed building known as the Lyceum. It was constructed in 1802 as a newsroom and became England's first subscription library. Later became a gentleman's club. The man behind this beautiful design was architect Thomas Harrison. Thomas Harrison was from Chester, which is only about 25-30 miles away from Liverpool, so it's not too far. Thomas Harrison's original plan was for the building to face Church Street and not Bow Street, and he wanted a flight of steps leading up to the entrance. But unfortunately, the plan had to be altered to meet local circumstances. So each of the library's 892 subscribers contributed 12 guineas, which was roughly about £12 today, towards the actual construction. Sadly, many of those founding members traded in enslaved Africans, either directly or indirectly. So using their money, a 50-year lease was gained on the land purchased, and construction began around about 1800 and finished 2 years later at a cost of £11,000, which was an astronomical sum of money back in those days. It doesn't sound so much now. I mean, if someone gave me 11,000 to create a building like this, it would be a dream. But during those time, it was an incredible amount of money. So amongst the signatories who signed the deed was William Roscoe. William Roscoe is the famous child of Liverpool who campaigned against slavery amongst other things. So he also campaigned for the rights of women's education and for the rights of the poor. So yeah, he was an incredible person, a socialist in so many ways, although he was a very rich socialist as well. The story of the Lyceum began in 1757 when a small literary club would meet at the house of schoolmaster William Everard to discuss reviews, periodicals and later books that were circulated amongst the members. The following year, the Liverpool Library was established, becoming England's first subscription library. Then books were circulated amongst the members, and the books that was originally held on a large chest of William Everard's parlour were then circulated in various premises throughout the city. 40 years later, the club members proposed the construction of a library to house the growing collection, which were then housed at Lord Street. And subsequently, as mentioned, 2 years later, the Lyceum was constructed. Over time, the newsroom expanded, eventually taking over most of the building, and it became known as the Lyceum Gentlemen's Club. By 1841, so within a period of just 40 years, the library had over 30,000 volumes. In 1942, the library part of the building closed and the book collection was given to Liverpool Public Library. 10 years later, in 1952, after 150 years in the building, the club had to move into new premises into the city centre. The Lyceum became Grade 2 listed building, and that grading was given on the 28th June 1952, which then specified the building as being a place of special interest by the National Heritage of England. In 1971, the building was sold to private developers who wanted to demolish it for a shopping complex and an extension to the Liverpool Central train station, which is just located behind it. So the people of Liverpool signed a petition, and Save Britain's Heritage became involved and forced government's Department of Environment to purchase the land from developers, which eventually stopped it from being demolished. Today, the building, as you can see, is not in a usable state. It has undergone lots of changes since then in terms of its usage. It has been used as a post office and subsequently now is unused, with the hope of that one day this glorious building would be restored to its fully functioning capabilities very, very soon. As gorgeous as Bow Street is on ground level, it's only when you look up that the magic truly begins. Just opposite the Lyceum itself, on number 12 Bow Street, is the Crips. Now this is one of the oldest shop fronts on Bow Street. The Crips was known for high quality clothing, from hats to specially made dresses for ladies. Round about 1860, a facade work was commissioned by John Cripp, and then in early 1970s, Sadly, it was shut down at the same time as the Lyceum. Later, it became a Waterstone bookstore, but the branch closed, and now today it's in this horrible state, as you see now. Next to the crypts on number 10 Bowl Street is also a Grade 2 listed building. It was originally a private house, but was later converted to a shop. On the opposite side of the crypts, on number 18 to 26 Bowl Street, is Radiant House. This was the new headquarters of the then Liverpool Gas Company. The architect behind this beautiful building is Lieutenant Colonel Ernest G. It took a long time and there was a lot of effort to complete the actual building itself. As you can see, compared to the crypts, it does have a lot of modernist architecture, a lot of those elements to it as well. And there was 4 floors that was devoted to offices. It's surprisingly, you can't tell from the outside, but inside there was a roof garden as well as an aquarium. Further along on number 52 Bowl Street is this gorgeous building that you see. It was built as a musical designed by Arthur Hill Home. Today, just behind the actual building itself, known as the Marlborough House, is Concert Square. Concert Square today is essentially the place where a lot of youngsters, a lot of people tend to come along for music events and in entertainment. It's a very popular venue, which is in some reflection a homage to Marlborough House itself. On the opposite side, further along, on number 43 to 47 Bowl Street, is the Liverpool Union Bank. It was originally a branch of the Liverpool Union Bank, and this Italianate palace of commerce was designed to have independent shops on either side of the central doorway, which led through to the banking hall. It was built in 1885. This gorgeous building was designed by George Enoch Grayson, who's a local architect, so he's born and brought up in Liverpool. George's son, also an architect and also called George, partly designed the Lloyds Bank branch on 66 to 68 Bowl Street some 35 years later, after his dad designed this Liverpool Union Bank. After that, we have on 65 to 67 Bowl Street is essentially a chapel that became a home to a famous racing driver, which then later became an opera hall and then cafe. Built in 1828, it was built as a chapel and later became a place of entertainment called the Queen's Hall. In 1935, the Art Deco frontage that you see just there was added, and it became the house of a prominent celebrity within the locality by the name of William Watson. Now, William Watson was a Liverpool-born racing driver and motoring pioneer. He was a champion cyclist as a young man. He founded a cycle company and motorcar manufacturer in 1901 and became a prominent motorcar dealer. He expanded the company to Chester, Column Bay, London, Birkenhead and Crewe, creating arguably the largest car distributing firm in north of England. And specialised in Rolls-Royce car. I mean, to do that in 1935 is an incredible achievement, and just goes to show his prominence and his success as a businessman. The premise went through several changes throughout its history, from a panorama hall to an opera house, then later to a cafe. A little bit further along on 722 Bowl Street, we have a wonderful find. This shop contains an underground well, which is incredible. I mean, it's over 200 years old. The well was dating back to 17th century, when Bowl Street was a green open space where most of the area were fields, as already mentioned in the introduction to this video. In 2001, the well was discovered by a team of Jeff Pierce. Now, Jeff Pierce was the owner of Jeff's, and when his team was working in a cellar to remove an old air raid shelter, a small hole was discovered in the floor area. So they tried to fill it up, but it kept on reopening. They then approached archaeologists from the Liverpool Museum to work on the site for several weeks, who discovered several channels that cut into the ground leading to the well. The channels were likely to be used by the rope makers to lower ropes into water so they could plait them together while drawing them out of the well. I mean, originally the well was built for water drinking purposes. The water came through sandstone, takes several years to come through and purify itself. So the people used to hide the well as a drinking water was such a premium back in those days. You wouldn't be able to tell, but the actual well is 40 feet deep, and the water does fluctuate between 4 to 6 feet. And people, when they do look over the actual well, they expect it to be a little deep, but when they realize, I mean, just how deep it is, and the crazy thing is inside the shop as well. It just takes their breath away, and they also feel like you're going to fall into the actual well. Today, this well acts as a wishing well. So the money that's thrown into the well is collected annually and donated to Older Hay Rocking Horse charity, who are using the money essentially to build UK's first integrated cancer unit for children. A few doors away from this wonderful well is another fascinating building on 75 to 79 Bold Street. This brilliant building has a Greek revival style with columns, frieze and cornices. It was built in 1830. Unfortunately, there isn't that much information as to what this building was used for, but looking at the opulence of the building, you can just imagine who would have owned such an amazing building and the history that it would have gone through. And then finally, to the end of the road, near to the bombed out church, the first building is 130 Bold Street, is known as the Havelock Building. This was the birthplace of Sebastian de Ferrante, who was one of Britain's greatest inventors. He's considered to be the father of modern electricity production and distribution system. Sebastian was born in 1864. He's a son of a Belgian-born photographer who had a successful studio at the premise. At the age of 24, Sebastian helped establish world's first high-voltage AC power station at Deptford. By producing AC electricity in few huge power stations, distribution through a national grid, and it was made possible to have cheap electricity for all, which was an incredible achievement. Pretty much it's the same system that's used all over the world today. So essentially, Sebastian, as Scouser, is responsible for the electric revolution that you see, or the system that you see that's being used throughout the world. So his amazing story began here in Bold Street. There's so many more buildings. I mean, you just have to walk through Bold Street, and rather than looking at the shop on the ground floor, if you just look up, it's absolutely breathtaking. Each building seems to have its own story. Each building is different from each other. It's a shame that there's not a lift that goes along the top of Bold Street itself, because it'd be wonderful just to see it from that perspective. Looking up, you can only see so much of the details. It's breathtakingly beautiful, but if we ever had the opportunity to see it at face value, so close, you can just imagine just how beautiful and stunning these buildings are, and the hard work that would have gone into it, and the architectural brilliance of each of the building would be heightened even more. So many buildings, so many stories, and each building has gone through a process of journey that will be fascinating to discover one day. And I hope somebody out there can do that, because history is incredible, and history in a place like this, which has so much stories to tell, it is even more exciting. Finally, one of the things that Bold Street is famous for is time traveling. There has been reports of people claiming to have transformed back into time, time traveling, where they've been transported into 1950s, 1960s, where the roads have gone from tarmac to cobblestone. There are strange occurrences of men wearing hats and women wearing golden scarves, and the vans are honking away in the olden day style. Who knows how much truth is in all that. But there has been a lot over the years. So sometimes you do wonder to yourself: is this some sophisticated hoax? Is it a mass hallucination on a major scale, or is there some genuine truth in it? I mean, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Time traveling is not exactly my strength, or science isn't. I'm the same person who wasn't set one for in every subject minus science. I couldn't even tell you the difference between an atom and a proton, let alone speak about time traveling. But it is a wonderful mystery, and one that adds more depth to the city itself and to the road. And it's not only Bow Street, and there has been reports of people in Hanover Street and like sort of Whitechapel as well, where they've also mentioned about these strange tales. So anyway, that's one more feature to this wonderful and historic road itself.